Hi there. Today I thought I'd start a series of videos whereby I look at common, well-known strategies within football and do my own little take on them uh, with a view to automating them within Fairbot. Now, huge caveat, I do not trade football. So I have no idea if these strategies that you find on the internet are in any way successful long term, but this is just my interpretation of them from an automation point of view. So use them at your own risk. With that out of the way, let's just bash on. So today I'm going to look at laying the draw at half time, which is a fairly common twist on the standard lay of the draw technique. The main reason being is your draw odds are a lot shorter at half time than they are at the beginning of the match. So if we open up the strategy editor, I've already created a blank strategy. So the first thing I'm going to do is to set up a rule that holds some common conditions that the other rules will be able to check. So let's just put in a description here. Check global conditions, and we want to set that at relative to the start of the match. Since this is a second half or a half-time thing, we'll just set that to start at 60 minutes. The action is going to be dummy. This rule isn't going to actually do anything. All it's going to do is to check conditions. Now, there's a variety of conditions it needs to check. First of all, we want to make sure that there's plenty of money in the market. So let's just check the market volume. We'll set that to 75,000. Now keep in mind this is the amount of money in the market at the time this rule fires. It's not the amount of money in the market at the beginning of the event. So you may actually want to increase that. The soccer traders amongst you will have a better idea of what that figure should be. The next thing we want to check is whether or not it's actually a draw at half time. Now there's a number of options here, of course. Do you want this strategy only to lay the draw if it's 0-0 at half time, or are you happy to do so for any draw? I mean, certainly there may be an argument to say that if the score is 2-2 at half time, the market may well be expecting further goals in the second half. So there's a variety of ways of doing that. First one is the football fixed score, and that allows you to actually specify a specific score. For example, 0-0. See, you can also see from here that there's an any score option loose, so you can specify a score, any score where the home team hasn't scored, or vice versa, that type of thing. But generally speaking, this only allows you to specify a particular score, 0-0. There's another option. You can do the same thing, and that's the number of goals. Now, if you set the number of goals equal to 0, by definition, it must be 0-0. But if you want to cover any score draw or 0-0, it's best to use a third condition, which is football or relative score, which allows you to specify the home team's score being equal to the away team's score plus 0. In other words, the home team's score is equal to the away team's score. Any kind of draw. So that's the one we're going to use, so we can get rid of those two. And we also want to check that we're coming up to the second half. So there's another condition that you can apply, which is the market football second half time option. And this is the time since the start of the second half. Now you'll see that it can be less than or greater than. Essentially what you want is less than Let's just set that to a minute. So the market or the match will have just moved into its second half. And those are the three main conditions that we want to check. So just click on all that. OK for that. Right, now, the only thing about that last one that I put in there, obviously you could theoretically get a goal right at the start of the first half, which may mean that you don't place any lay. Alternatively, it may mean that you do. That may be an equaliser that's just been scored, so you'll just grab the tail end of that. So the other thing that you may want to do is to make sure that the market is actually active, i.e. it's not in suspend mode. So just add that in there. So that'll be the market state. Make sure that that says active as opposed to the other options of suspended and closed. And finally, you could, if you so desire, add in market in play, and that just checks that the market is in play as well. So we've got those number of conditions in there. Okay. So now we need to go and add in the rule that's going to do the work, i.e. placing the bet. So let's just add in another rule. And this is going to be play the draw at halftime. So again, that's going to be relative to in-play time. So we put that to 60 minutes. The action is going to be placing a bet. You could theoretically do a lay to back trade here, but keep in mind that the way the market moves in football when a goal is scored, if you put in a lay with a closing offset bet, back bet, you may miss out on the odds either one way or the other, so you'll either not win as much money or you may actually not get closed out. So we're just going to place a bet and we'll use a green up all option or a green up the selection option to close off the trade. So we're going to place a bet and we're going to place this bet on the draw. So make sure you have by name selected and the draw. The third option is always called the draw, irrespective of the match. We're going to lay the bet. It's going to be at best back odds, and we'll just take one tick higher just to make sure we get matched. And we'll set that to 100 as a liability. Now, anyone who's familiar with my videos will know that I tend to work to a liability when I'm in laying, but you can obviously adjust that to suit. We can put in a filler kill, given time delays and so on, and how the market moves. You might want to put that, and let's just say put it in for 3 minutes, for example. Actually, let's put it in for 5 minutes. That'll give us plenty of time. So you won't have something hovering around the market too long. There's no need to put a keep in since we're already going to be in play. Now we need to have a condition here, and that condition is a simple one in that we simply need to check that all our conditions have already been met. Now if they have been met, this rule here will have executed once. So all we need to do is check for that. So check the number of global conditions, and that's equal to 1. And that's it. So in other words, with that option there set to 1, this rule will not fire unless that rule has fired beforehand. In other words, all those conditions there are true. Even if, for example, the market is subsequently suspended, this rule will have already fired, so that will still remain as 1. So this will still execute. Now you might be thinking, hang on, Alistair, why are you putting 2 rules there when all of these conditions here can just be stuck in this rule? Yes, you can do it that way, but it's personal preference. If I have subsequent rules further down here that depend on the same conditions, it saves me, if I ever want to change those conditions, it saves me going into each individual rule and modifying it. And that happens quite a lot, particularly if you're just developing a strategy and you're testing a strategy and you need to chop and change with the numbers a little bit. It's best, in my view, to set up global conditions and use that as the trigger for whatever subsequent rules come down. But personal preference, you can indeed put it all in there if you wish, but you may find out you're having to repeat the same thing in any subsequent rules. So what's happening here is that these conditions are all checked at half time, and if they are true, this rule will put in a liability £100 lay at the current back odds plus 1 tick. And that's it. Now, you may want to, rather than sticking all of your stake at that one point, you may want to drip feed into the market. And that way you capitalize a little bit on some of the time delay in the second half, hopefully before a goal is scored. So let's just copy and paste that particular rule, and we'll edit that one directly. So let's just change the name of that to drip feed lay the draw. Again, we're going to be starting off at the same time, but in this case, because we want to put in, let's say, 4 bets 5 minutes after each other, we're going to set that to 4 and a wait time of 5 minutes, which is 300 seconds. So what will happen is, when these conditions up here are true, this is going to feed in a bet immediately. It will then wait 300 seconds, pop it in again, and again, and again. So the action is going to be the same, except we need to change our stake. Let's put it to 25, so we've still got an overall liability of £100. And again, we can keep all the other settings the same. The conditions are going to be the same because it needs those conditions here to be true. Okay, so what we've got now is 2 separate rules, both of which are applying lays. The first one is going to put in our full stake, and the second one is going to put in our full stake, but split up into 4 separate lays, which are going to be entered at 5-minute intervals. Now, depending on what you want to do, you may not want these two structured like that. In other words, you may only want one of them in this strategy to work. So simply disable one of those, whichever one you prefer. Alternatively, you can combine the two. So if we go in and edit this rule and change the liability to, let's say, 50. So we're going to put in 50% of our total liability right at the beginning. On this particular one, but then we're also going to put in an extra 25 at the same point. So we're effectively going to have 70. Sorry, no, I beg your pardon, I need to change that, not £25. So we change that to £12.50. So we've split that up into 4 £12.50 bets. So what we'll end up is a total of 50 plus £12.50, so that's £62.50 going in right at the beginning of the first half, and then we'll have 3 subsequent bets of £12.50. So you can split these two up however you like, so that you put one in complete at the beginning of the second half, and then other drip-fed bets in accordingly. Okay, so we're still going to end up with a total liability of £100 by keeping both of these in. And the idea of this one, of course, is you're trying to get a better value for your lays as the time decay kicks in the second half. Keeping in mind, however, that you may end up with a goal being scored before all of these subsequent drip-fed bets are placed into the market. Now, here's something that you need to consider. This process is going to take 20 minutes to get all 4 bets placed in. So there's a fair chance that you will get a goal scored in that time. So all 4 bets won't be placed. Now, what happens, of course, I presume, as I say, I don't trade football, but I presume when a goal is scored, the market is suspended still these days. The football traders among you will be able to advise me otherwise. When the market goes suspended, this here will not be able to submit bets, but as soon as it becomes active again, what will happen is the bets will still go in. So we need to stop that happening in some way. Now, I could, if I edit a rule here and add in a condition, I could set the condition so that the market state is active. And what happens in this particular case is this rule will kick in, it will execute up to 4 times as long as the market is active. Now, if it goes suspended, if the market's suspended at the time when that execution is due to take place, that bet will not go in. It will effectively be on hold. And as soon as the market becomes active again, those bets will start going in. And that may not be what you want. What I would suggest is that, generally speaking, when it becomes suspended, there's a fair chance there's a goal being scored. So we want to check that. So I would suggest we set up a separate rule, similar to this global conditions one, where we simply check if the market has been suspended. And again, we're going to set that relative to the in-play start time. The action again is going to be dummy, and we don't want it to do anything specific. And all we're going to do is check the market state and see if it has been suspended. Now, if we move that up a little bit, I just like to order things, all of my conditions near the top. And then we need to come in here and remove this condition here. Remove that, but we need to add in this. So if it's been suspended, this rule will have been executed once, right? So what we want is we want to make sure that the market hasn't been suspended, which would allow us these bets to go in. So we need that to be equal to 0. Okay, so what will happen here is, as long as these two sets of conditions are, so those are the initial conditions, the global conditions, excuse me, they all have to be true. So this here will go to 1, which will allow that to be true. And as long as there hasn't been a suspension, this rule here will not have executed. So it will be, execution count will be set to 0. So as long as that's set to 0, this rule here will also fire. So imagine that it's executed twice, and then 10 minutes into the second half, there's a goal. This rule here will trigger because the market will get suspended. That then, this condition here will therefore no longer be true, which means that the remaining 2 executions of this rule will not fire. Okay? And now keeping in mind, of course, that market state suspended option, that will get executed if there's a goal, if there's a VAR decision, if there's a red card, if there's a potential penalty awarded. It will essentially stop any further bets going in on the drip feed option. Now this video is always reaching 20 minutes. It was getting on twice as long as I had originally intended, and we've still to implement any get out options. So I think what I'll do is I'll leave that discussion for a future video. We'll do a part 2 to this video, but before we wrap up, let's just implement a straightforward green up option to finish off this particular rule as it is at the moment. So what we're going to do is green up the selection. This market is now in play. And we're going to assume that a goal has been scored and the potential profit on the draw is in the green. So what we want to do is green up the selection. The selection that we're going to green up is, of course, the draw. And the conditions there will be selection green up PL, choose by name, and then the draw. Now that's always used in football markets. You've got your two teams and the draw. So that's a safe option to choose. Now what we want to do is we want to hedge up on this particular selection, i.e. the draw, if the hedge option is greater than 0. In other words, it's in profit. You could, of course, set that to a negative figure in the situation where, although the odds have increased for the draw, the profit obtained may not be green. But it gives you a get out. So you always green up whenever there's been a selection and the odds have increased. But we'll just set it to 0. We'll be optimistic and assume there's going to be a profit. And that's it. The other thing that you may want to check, however, is to make sure it's still not suspended. So let's just put in there and make sure that the market state is active. And that's it. So we'll wrap the video up for there. In part 2, I'll come back and we'll talk about hedging out when things aren't going your way to minimize your losses and so on and so forth. But we'll leave that for later on in the week. Thanks for watching.